request for proposals for senior virtual villages. We'll be going through the PowerPoint, and then we'll have time for questions. I apologize that the PowerPoint is heavily laden with words. Bidders conferences have pretty much taken some parts of the RFP and put them in the PowerPoint. It's my every grain of how I do PowerPoints, but it's the best way so that you can all see the details. And we'll be walking through parts, just talking over the overview, and then there will be questions at the end. This is, everybody on the call and in the room should know we are recording this, and that's our standard practice to record bidders conferences so that then we can post them on, have easy access to everybody who was not able to be here. And
audio or video recording or both?
I am greatly hoping that it's only audio.
Will this PowerPoint be posted?
And the PowerPoint, along with the answers to the questions that are occurred today and any questions that came in prior, will be posted early next week on the RFP website. So we'll go ahead and get going. And Adam, I'm going to trust that you will interrupt me if things are going awry from your administrator's point of view on handling the call.
I'll be nice and loud.
All right. So first of all, let me introduce myself, and then we will start doing some acknowledgments. My name is Tracy Adair. I'm with the Older Adults and Healthy Aging team at the Adult Services Division of Department of Community and Human Services. We are running this request for proposal through the Adult Services Division, and I'll be the lead on this request for proposal, so any questions and concerns come to me on that. The first thing we want to do is acknowledge that anytime we are having a meeting in the Chinook building, we are on the lands of the Duwamish people, and we want to thank the Duwamish people past and present for the use of this unceded, make sure we're acknowledging that it is unceded lands we are using today and always when we do our business here in Chinook. So thank you.
What does it mean, unceded?
Taken without permission. So I shared who I am. Let's start with the folks in the room, and we're going to have a very quick set of introductions. Say your name and who you are representing today, and then we will do a one-by-one on the phone for that. And since I can't see people's names, I don't know if Adam can, but we'll try.
I'll pipe in with the Skype introductions, and I'll preview them for you. That way they can go ahead and introduce themselves.
That would be wonderful. So we'll do the room, and then we'll send it to Adam.
Sounds great.
We'll start with.
My name is Humphrey.
My name is Keith Snodgrass. I work with the International Rescue Committee.
I'm Susie Calhorn, Vashon Senior Center.
Catherine Swearingen, Vashon Senior Center.
Angie Hinojos Yusuf, Centro Cultural Mexicano.
Carlos Jimenez, Centro Cultural Mexicano in Redmond.
Janet Velasco, North Shore Senior Center in Buffalo.
Jean Marie Thomas, supporting both Wider Horizons and Westside Neighbors Network.
Sue Lerner, Wider Horizons Senior Village in Seattle.
Judy Messier, Westside Neighbors Network, a village in West Seattle.
Oleg Benda, Ukrainian Community Center.
Liz Ill, Vashon Senior Center.
Great. So that is everybody in the room.
Okay, so hi everybody, this is Adam Schmid, also with King County, and I'll be introducing some of the Skype members, and then we have a lot of guests on the phone. First, on Skype, we have Belina Van. Belina, could you introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Belina Van. I'm the program manager at Volunteer Services through Catholic Community Services.
Thank you, Belina. Next we have is Jan Culp. Jan?
Yes, I'm one of the technical advisors from 501 Commons.
Dan Culp is a technical advisor from 501 Commons.
Your volume up a little bit? Yeah.
It's pretty high up. I'm sorry, I don't have speakers. I will repeat, if there's questions, I will repeat them.
So yeah, that was Jan Culp, a technical assistance provider. We also have Jane Silzer. Jane? Jane is currently muted. Oh, there we go.
I'm representing the Filipino community of Seattle and also the Eritrean Association of Seattle.
Adam, we weren't able to hear that in the room.
That was Jane with the Filipino Community Center and the Eritrean Community Association.
Thank you, Jane.
We also have Jay on the line. Jay? And Jay was fairly, it sounds like you're traveling there. It was a little hard to understand you, but we can keep moving on. And if you have any other questions, just pipe up. We also have Michelle Smith on the line. Michelle as well is currently muted. We also have Rihanna Nolet. And we have Sarah Green. Those are all the Skype users.
Okay.
And then we have several people who have joined by phone. This is a little tough, so if whoever wants to jump in first, go right ahead, and we'll just move on through.
Leslie Johnson from Black Diamond Community Center.
Did you hook up to TV, you computer to the volume of the TV? I think that's the way to do it.
Okay, when there's questions, I will make sure to repeat the question.
We're going to double dip this.
I have no idea how many people are talking.
So that was Leslie Johnson.
This is 16, I assume that's.
Yeah, that's 16.
Oh, okay.
Hi, I'm Susie Chandler. I'm with Northwest Neighbors Network in Shoreline and North.
Thank
Welcome,
you, Susie.
Welcome.
Bonnie Olson, another technical assistance provider with Emerging Design Consulting.
So another technical assistance provider, Bonnie.
Hi, this is Catherine Valenti. I'm also one of the technical assistance providers. We are assistance available to small organizations, many of you in the room, to help you through the application process.
So Catherine Valenti is another of the technical assistance providers available. So there are 3 so far technical assistance providers on the phone, and you have a sheet and that's also on the RFP website. Anybody else by phone?
Hi, it's Charmy.
Did not catch that, the phone situation.
Hi, it's Michelle Smith with Seattle Social Services, Salvation Army.
Welcome, Michelle. And Adam, in the room and also just sometimes on the phone, people's phones are very far away. So when it comes to the questions, we will rely on you, Adam, for repeating the questions to us. But for now, yes. I'm going to just be talking.
That's a good idea. We'll be able to capture the questions as well in the Skype chat, so we can make sure and record all of that, so it'll be in the FAQ as well. Okay.
Great. Again, appreciate folks' patience with this. Luckily, I think that you can hear Adam and myself, and so I'll be talking through this, and then we will make sure people's questions are repeated. So what we're going to cover today, just again, what is the Veterans, Seniors, and Human Services Levy, overview of the social engagement strategy for senior virtual villages, overview of the RFP itself, going into some details on that, reminding folks that technical assistance is available through our one of our several technical assistance providers you can choose from, and information about that is on the site of the RFP. Looking a little bit at how to apply, we're going to review the budget template for this particular RFP because it's a little different, and then we'll ask questions and provide answers, or let you know that we'll post answers if I'm not able to answer directly today any question. I'm going to go quickly through what the Veterans, Seniors, and Human Services Levy is, because I believe several folks may know about that, and the PowerPoint will be posted. Basically, this is a levy that was passed by King County voters in 2017. It is a levy that funds through January 2018 through December 31st, 2023, with 77 strategies outlined, with 3 population areas: veterans, seniors, and vulnerable populations. All the funding from this particular RFP come from the seniors bucket of money. The implementation plan for this levy was passed in 2018, and since then we've been rolling out those 77 strategies at a pretty quick and furious pace and funding services throughout King County. The levy has 5 areas of focus, and those are housing stability, financial stability, social engagement, healthy living, and system access and improvement. This particular request for proposal, the virtual villages, is connected to the social engagement. So the outcomes for this are related to ensuring that older adults in King County have opportunities for social engagement and connection and meaning connection through those strategies. The guiding principle of the levy is about connection, belonging, and what can only the VSHSL do. So some of the strategies through the VSHSL fund programs that are also funded through other entities, and the places where VSHSL touches is to reach and stretch that funding to populations that may not be able to be served through the other funding sources, or provide services through those programs that may not be able to be funded through other sources. So the overall goal of the levy is to ensure that all people, regardless of who they are and where they live in King County, have the opportunity to thrive with full and equal access to opportunities, power, and resources. And that's kind of the driving force behind the levy and the decisions that are made around funding. Okay, now here's where the heavy wording comes in. This strategy is, again, as I said, is one of the social engagement strategies. And in this particular set of social engagement and strategies, we contribute to the community level effort to build and maintain networks that increase personal and community resilience for seniors and veterans in King County. This particular one is directed to seniors. The implementation plan recognizes that King County needs an array of programs that support social engagement, and therefore senior virtual villages are a complement to the recent Senior Hubs funding. So as we look at a map and a spread of King County, we want to share the opportunities. So where there are Senior Hub funding, we're trying to look at opportunities where their Senior Village funding can fill in some supports and services. The expected outcome of this strategy is that low-income seniors from diverse populations, including rural seniors, will remain in their home communities of choice and experience culturally appropriate connections, even those people who live alone. So the scope is for the funding allows emerging villages to develop in areas with less access to Senior Hub supports, or existing villages to grow, and in particular increasing their inclusion for people of color, low-income members, immigrants and refugees, and rural elders if there's a village that already exists that would be appropriate to include rural elders. For the purposes of this RFP, we're using the following definition, and I'm going to read straight from the PowerPoint. A senior virtual village is a senior-specific, neighborhood-based, or geographically centered organization that has a defined membership, is majority run by volunteers and members, with some paid staff. The virtual senior village provides volunteer-provided services such as transportation, health and wellness programs, home repairs, community engagement activities, and access to vetted and affordable service providers. Senior virtual villages funded by this funding stream must ensure that low-income seniors can equitably and equally access the virtual villages services. We have an array, and it's not exhaustive, of services that can be funded through this RFP, but things like staffing or consultants to provide duties that are such as but not limited to outreach, volunteer coordination, administrative support, community relations, fund development, cross-cultural connections, and the and/or is misplaced on there, but so staffing to support the service, the kind of coming together that the village would do. It can fund establishing a method for supporting membership of low-income seniors to ensure that equitable and equal access to the benefits of the virtual village. We're not dictating what that looks like or how that method of support would allow for low-income participants. So that's where the thinking on your end comes in. Supporting collaboration among established or emerging villages to provide shared administrative services, outreach to diverse populations, training or consultation, or other services that support diverse membership in the village model will be funded through this RFP. You can purchase equipment, purchase and development of data system technology that will support the administration of the village. You can use the funding for social engagement activities that are culturally relevant to the focus populations that your virtual village is intending to serve. Oh my gosh, there's continued list of things, and this is all in the RFP, but we want to make sure that you are understanding the scope of the possibilities. You can use funds for enabling access to technology that allows members to connect to their volunteers and other members of the village. Training for participants, volunteers, and members to ensure safety and security in operating any of the technology. You can use the funding for volunteer background checks and other pieces that support the safety of the village. You can use funding related to transportation, whatever that could be, vehicles, it could be other forms of transportation funding that supports membership and supports connections. You could use the funding for necessary insurance for vehicles or background checks or volunteer, or those kinds of liability pieces that support the safety and the supports the liability, your safety as a village. You can use it for consultation services to establish the sustainability and the security of the senior village, including the creation of liability release forms and participation waivers. So you can consult on those types of pieces, and the funding for that consultation would be appropriate for this request. You can pay for consultation or direct services for outreach and development of services and supports that are culturally relevant to the focus population if you're not from that focus population, or if the majority of the village folks are not from the focus population that you want to reach, but you want to strengthen your inclusion. You can use consultation funding. You can use funding for consultation. You can use it to support operational costs. And then you can use it for other activities that you describe that are intended to strengthen the sustainability of the senior village model. Focus populations for this are seniors. So in the levy, the definition of seniors are people 55 and older. So we're particularly talking about people who live in King County. And for this particular RFP, we're looking at people who are living in stable housing in a community of their choice somewhere in King County who do not currently participate in the virtual, in a senior village. So those who may not be well served in the senior village in which they currently participate, or who could be better served by the senior village in which they currently participate, are also included in that definition. In particular, we're looking at seniors living in rural areas of King County, particularly areas that lack easy access to a senior hub. Low-income seniors who may not be able to afford membership, if that's if membership fees are the way that the village defines its membership. Seniors from immigrant or refugee communities, and seniors of color. So those are we have kind of 4 areas of focus population. And those are covering. The RFP for the total amount is available $2,623,350 is available for the program period of May 1st. So we anticipate contracts by May 1st through December 31st, 2023, which is the end of the levy. We're allowing for annual awards, I didn't update the RFP, but I'll talk about a little addendum. I didn't update this PowerPoint, but I'll talk about an addendum. That 150,000 from the strategy refers to an annual request amount. In addition to the funding that's available through this strategy, the VSHSL provides some technical assistance and capacity building dollars. I mean, it's separate from the technical assistance for applying. We have some set aside funding that's available to eligible awardees. So if an application is awarded and that organization fits the eligibility criteria for those funds, then some funding may be available through that pot of funding as well. And that's in addition to, separate from the $150,000 a year request that we're saying is what we're having folks limit their requests to for the strategy. So the capacity building dollars are separate from that. 2020 funding is assured through the council budget process. We expect the additional funding to be assured, but we always have to say that we rely on the council's budget approval as those years come forward.
So this is 3 years budget.
4-year budget. So 2021, 22, and 23 is what the RFP requests. We indicate awards and say this is expected to be awarded through the levy. Our contract period is for 2 years of a contract, and then we contract again. But if an entity is awarded, the award will indicate through 2023.
So it's one application for that.
Yep. Yes. Eligibility are I have to look at my RFP because I didn't copy one piece of this, but it's a small organization, nonprofit organizations, governmental organizations, tribal organizations are all eligible. And in particular, we're looking at emerging neighborhood-based or geographically centered senior villages in areas of the county with less access to a senior hub that seeks to support in establishing themselves as a senior village. They may not be one now and they're emerging as one. Or established senior villages, especially those that if they are already connected to a senior hub or in an area that is easily access to a senior hub, they're serving a population that senior hub may not be serving, or serving the population in a way different from the senior hub. So the complement to the senior hub funding is really what we're emphasizing in this, is looking at spreading the strategy funding around to serve folks throughout King County, geographically and culturally. Just a piece on this is a standard piece we talk about in RFPs. You are not required to submit a detailed, fully developed evaluation plan. Please be sure that your model accounts for the anticipated requirements for data that we are requiring for all VSHSL funded strategies, and that helps us kind of just tell the story of what's happening in King County and what's happening with this funding, who we're serving and who we're not serving, how well these people, what the services are and how well that's working. Are these strategies working in the same way we think they are? If not, let's make some adjustments. So our partners in our awards will be expected to help us with that through their data pieces. So we will be collecting client level data at some point, and we'll also be collecting aggregate level data, and those will, after awards, we'll talk individually with our contractors to make sure to work collaboratively on what pieces make sense around those data collections. And there's always narrative reports and data reports required on a regular basis through the funding of these opportunities. So I'm going to talk through the rating criteria, and that's also as the last few pages of the RFP. So we want to make sure that the program model demonstrates clear understanding of how this funding will help programs achieve their goals for their village, whether that's an established village reaching out to others or a new village coming into its own. It illustrates clear ideas about who they will serve, and with a special focus on the identified diverse and or low income populations and their ideas for how to ensure equal and equitable access to membership for diverse and low income seniors. Applicants have strong methods for recruiting, sustaining volunteers, and vetting those volunteer pools, and making sure that those volunteers understand kind of their village and the responsibilities of a volunteer and the connections. Applicants describe a clear enrollment method and membership requirements so that people know if they're part of that village or not. How do you know you're part of that community? Applications identify clear strategy for connecting with the focus populations they propose to serve, with creative outreach methods to reach that population, and a clear plan for how to achieve inclusivity. If you are a village that doesn't serve, currently may not have a lot of members from the focus population you want to embrace, then how will you ensure inclusivity? And then a nod to describing a story of how the proposed senior village or the expansion of a current village helps King County meet the needs of seniors across the county by building or expanding senior villages in areas with less access to senior hubs. So and on the RFP part of this website is a list of where the hubs are and the areas of the county they serve. That was the program model. Going on for rating criteria, organizational capacity, just the ability to tell a clear story about how these funds will support sustainability, but also what are your opportunities for sustainability beyond these funds. So how telling that story of this can't be the only funding source for the virtual village you are running. Equity and social justice are kind of looked at in two ways. We have an equity chart for organizations and their board members. We did not put volunteers on there because we specifically made a choice not to indicate that. Sometimes volunteers are not always of the cultural group that you're going to reach. We want to acknowledge that that's an important piece, but we don't want to have that be the threshold. So there's a question related to equity and social justice, and that will be weighted as well as the equity chart, and just talking about if your equity chart does not reflect the community that you hope to serve, then how are you speak to that piece, and tell us about that story of how you will ensure equity and equitable access, and how you are working toward your program reflecting the folks you serve.
What are the components of the equity chart?
It talks about race and gender and identities for board members and staff members, and you just indicate. We also rate based on budget, and those are standard questions that our fiscal shop has indicated we should ask, and also just making sure that you know that we will request you and require applicants or awardees, to collect data in our evaluation process, and that's a collaborative process with our performance measurement and evaluation team. A set of narrative questions are on there, and I wanted to bring attention to two addendums we have posted to the RFP since it was posted. One is that I made a mistake on the narrative questions and was considering one set of questions on the data piece and ended up putting the other set in. So I've clarified those two, and now the narrative questions are posted as an narrative attachment BR. So that's simply the 14th question replaces the prior set of questions to match the criteria. We did a second addendum to clarify that the available funding, the $150,000 is expected annual request, and to clarify that the capacity building dollars are separate from that annual request. So that was just, I will share that when addendums are provided through this format, it can be a little confusing because you don't replace the whole RFP, you just you put an addendum on there that says, when you're reading this part of this RFP, read this paragraph instead of this paragraph. So we want to put out there that when you are looking at the RFP, make sure you look at all the attachments. 2 of the attachments are these addenda. Here's some timing. Today is our bidders conference, so we're on January 24th. You have until February 10th to request assistance if you are eligible for assistance through the application process. In order to be eligible for assistance through the application process, you must be a small organization defined as less than 20 full-time FTE. So if you have 19, you are eligible as long as you have less than $4 million annual budget. So an FTE, a full-time equivalent, it doesn't matter the number of bodies, it's the number of slots you have for full-time equivalents to make up that number. The final day to submit questions is February 17th. So we have a quick turnaround on that, and that is so that you can continue to ask questions fairly up until the end of the process. And then the applications are due on Monday, February 24th. I would tell yourselves 5 o'clock that day. It is, Zoom grants does say 11:59. So if you do it at 12, it's too late. 11:58 is okay, but I would say 5. It's good practice just to think of it earlier in the day in case there are issues, because we will not be available to answer last minute questions. We will be rating and reviewing in March. If we reserve the right to ask certain applicants back for interviews, if during the review process it makes sense to have some people in the room and ask some additional questions from the review panel. We don't always do that, but we have done that. Notification of award decision are anticipated to be in April, and then with the contracting date anticipated to be May 1st. I will highlight that dates are subject to change, but we hope we expect this to be the timeline. Yes.
Will the reviewing panel made up of a diverse group similar to the populations you're hoping to serve?
The question is the review panel going to be made up of diverse people reflective of the populations we hope to serve, and that is our expectation, yes, and that is our intent. We are building that review panel. I'm sorry.
What is that review age?
We try to get a diversity of ages, particularly emphasis on older adults or people who work with older adults. But and it looks like there's several questions in the room. I'm going to just hold off because I want to make sure we're getting to the end of the PowerPoint to the questions, and then we'll take questions from Skype and the room as well. So just a reminder, submit proposals well before 11:59 p.m. on Monday, February 24th. Complete submittals must include the response to the summary questions, which are not scored, response to narrative questions, which are scored based on the criteria you find in your RFP, budget using the template provided or a similar document, and a completed organizational equity chart. I'm going to keep going on this because I want to show you the budget if our technology works here. Okay, so one thing I want to note that isn't coming up on here, but I understand that some people's, whether you're using Chrome or a different platform, it comes up with some weird Microsoft thing that says you have to be a member. That is actually not the way we set it up, and we tested it. If you actually just ignore that and X out of that dialog box, you can still use the Excel sheet.
It never comes up.
Okay, if it doesn't come up for you, then it's not an issue. But
No. The dialog box up, you X out the blank Excel sheet.
okay, we tested it and that didn't happen, so I'm concerned because I want that to not happen, and that's not how we set this up, so I'm not sure what's happening with that. It's a mystery to me. We actually had one of our TA providers, I was walking through this, and they said, oh, that comes up, and I said, just X out of the dialog box, and they said it works, so I don't know if it's a platform someone's using versus another platform. I will work behind the scenes to figure out if we can post a version that doesn't have this, because it was not my intention to set it up that way, and we didn't set up through the web or a cloud-based something, so something is amiss and it doesn't happen on everybody's computer, because I know I have tested it from different computers, so I'm sorry that that's your experience, and we will try to solve that as soon as I can. Did you try to go through to the Excel?
2 different browsers.
Weird.
And it didn't like me.
Okay. And it's not on here because I have opened it up. There is sometimes a dialog box that says enable editing, and you will need to just click on that because that is standard. But I wanted to point out a couple things about the Excel sheet when you're able to open it. So there you will see that there's yellow highlights and green. The yellow are areas where you can fill in, and the yellow tabs are tabs we request that you fill in, and then they will feed the green areas. And if you need to make adjustments, you can, but it's formulated to calculate so that you don't do calculations yourself. There's a little bit different component to this budget than others because we've separated it out year by year, knowing that you may have, as you build your membership base or you build your fundraising or other areas, you may have a difference in annual amounts that you're requesting. So we've accommodated that and requested that you fill out by year rather than an average year. And that's different than other RFPs that I've been involved with here at the state. And then you will see that this last budget, the 5th tab on here, totals everything based on your other inputs on your budgets. And you will notice that there is a line separate for the technical assistance capacity funds if you're eligible for them. The total amount includes what you're asking for from the strategy funding, along with what you might be asking for capacity building. And that adds up there. Now, if I can figure out how to get, I think I can go like this and still be in the PowerPoint. Look at that. This is just instructions for the budget forum, and I may amend this PowerPoint to figure out what's going on with that particular situation. I haven't been able to find anybody here who can recreate that and say, that's what's happening. But I will do that. And in the meantime, so the budget form just reminds everybody that there's a final total program budget that pulls in all the formulas that some of which you put in yourselves and some of which have been calculated from what you put in. The yellow highlighted cells are ones that you are expected to enter. The green ones are calculated directly, but I think you can adjust them if needed. And that's what this says. A reminder that technical assistance for applying is available for small entities, those with fewer than 20 FTE, so 19. It's not 20 and below, it's 19 and fewer, and less than 4 million. So those are and you have to be less than 4 million and have less than 20 full-time equivalents. And please request that information, request that assistance if you're going to go that route by February 10th. We have at least 3 of our providers on the phone today, and the sheet about them and who they are and how to connect with them is available on the RFP site. And for those in the room, and all materials are posted on Zoom Grants. See the library tab for the materials. You must apply through Zoom Grants, and questions are, you have to answer your questions in Zoom Grants. I would recommend that you write your questions in Word and then enter them into the Zoom Grants, because it can be a frustrating process. We have opened up the limits on the number of characters, I think, to be a reasonable amount for these questions, but sometimes you might need to edit to fill. I don't think you'll need to edit to fill those, but it's always a good idea to have a Word version of it. And Zoom Grants, I believe, saves automatically. Sometimes I've had experiences where there's something funky about it and it doesn't tell you when it's saving, so it just and I'm just going to show you real quick. And these, though they look like they're barred out, if you toggle over them, that's where you are in it. I find that a little confusing myself, so I wanted to show everybody that this is actually this is an application version you can do, and just toggle on these to get to the right tab and pieces that you want. And when you contact admin, that's just an email to me. It doesn't look any different to me in my email. And I will continue to respond to questions with a formulated automatic reply, because we are in the silence period where, other than this bidders conference, I cannot answer individual questions. Questions that are asked at this bidders conference will be compiled, questions that were, and added to a few questions that were asked prior to this, and we'll post those very early next week. And then questions that come in up until the week before the RFP is due will be posted on a regular basis. But if you're asking questions and it comes to that, it's an email to me and you get an automatic response from me.
Is that the process for asking questions, to do that? Response?
The process for asking questions is you will get an automatic response that says, I cannot answer your question directly today individually to you. It will be posted to Zoom Grant on a regular basis.
Okay, so that's the process of asking questions.
Yep.
Okay.
See, that's what it looks like to me. And it doesn't say Zoom Grants question, or it doesn't tell you. You're actually sending an email, just an email to the person. But that's the process. Okay, and then again, or you can ask questions this way too, but you'll get the same response. So just to be equitable, I'm going to ask if there are any questions on the phone or on Skype first, and then we're going to ask some additional questions in the room, because it's always easy to ask your questions when you're in the room. So Adam, are there questions on Skype?
We haven't gotten any written questions in yet, but we do have several people on the phone, so I'll turn it over to them. If anyone on the phone has a question, now's the time to speak up and ask.
I could wait the uncomfortable time you're supposed to wait, which I think is 30 seconds. But I'm going to put myself out of my misery and the folks in the room who I know have questions. Listen, Catherine.
Can the Skype pull up the questions? Are they on Skype? If you could really...
Adam is monitoring that, so he's monitoring the chat.
They're talking. So they're chatting.
Adam, is anybody chatting?
Nope, we haven't had any typed or audio questions.
Phone questions, so you are welcome to ask your question. Was that your question?
No.
Oh, okay.
Speaking for a phone person, I don't have any questions. So thank you.
Thank you.
No questions here either.
All righty.
One thing, this is Bonnie. I would just request when people ask the questions in the room, if you can repeat the questions, because it's very hard on the phone to hear any comments that people in the room are making.
Yes, I appreciate that response, and we haven't got to the questions yet. We will make sure to repeat them, and then you can correct me if I'm repeating them wrong. Okay.
I have one question I just thought of.
I'm sorry. Wait a minute. What is there a question on the phone?
Yes. In looking at the RFP on the bottom of page 8, where it starts to talk about technical assistance and capacity building funds, that up to a total of $250,000 annually, is that for the whole RFP, everybody combined?
So the question is on page 8, it talks about capacity building dollars, and there is an up to $250,000. Yes, that is the full amount available to this strategy, and awarded entities, if they meet that capacity request for funds, we will review that, and that is what is available among all the awards.
Is there kind of a guideline as to the maximum that a single agency or a single applicant anyway should apply for? Is there a limit on that?
We are not putting a limit on what you're asking for the capacity building dollars, but we may not. We may weigh out what's available, what awarded applications bring in, and make equitable decisions across that based on where folks are at with those dollars.
Makes sense. Good.
And Tracy, we got another question written in. If you have time.
There was a follow-up in the room on that particular question, so if we can
go
have
ahead.
that follow-up, and then we can ask the typed-in question.
Sounds good.
So I was curious as to what sort of projects were you envisioning that money would go to, and why? So you pulled it out for a reason for that kind of technical assistance. I'm just curious if there's something you've had in mind that would be appropriate for that funding.
So the question in the room is there something we had in mind that's appropriate for that funding? And I don't have a specific particular thing in mind that's appropriate for that funding. We have parameters about what capacity building within the levy is available for, and it's pieces. It can be things like consultation. It can be a vehicle. It can be sometimes one-time types of funding that will build the capacity of your entity to do the work it needs to do. And I will follow this question up with a quote of those parameters from the levy. The implementation plan has a very wordy definition of what capacity building dollars would be available used for. Typed. So was everybody able? Was it helpful to have me? Did my repeating of that question solve the problem of not being able to hear in the room?
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Okay.
much clearer, Tracy. So thank you for doing that. As far as the type question, Jane has asked, is this funding aimed only at expansion of services to new folks as opposed to current services being provided by an existing village?
It would help. The question is it available only to expanding or new, or could it be used as with current services at a virtual village?
That's correct.
Our intention is to direct funding toward the 4 population groups we're talking about, and so if a virtual village is currently serving those populations and needs support with sustainability, that we could look at that piece. But our intention is to serve people who are currently not being served through a village now, expanding the services and supports available from villages to widen the net of people who are supported by virtual villages. Catherine in the room. Catherine had a question in the room earlier. I don't know if it got.
I have two.
Catherine has two questions.
Well, one is a plea, actually. So
Catherine has a plea.
when you are answering questions that get posted in grants,
When answering questions posted to Zoom grants,
could you answer them frequently, especially towards the end? Because waiting a week for an answer to a question that everything else is kind of hinging on is quite difficult.
we will take that into consideration, Catherine, and we will do our best to respond to questions as and post in a manner that supports applications.
My second question is,
Second question is, she lost. I'm trying to be reflective.
I'll come back.
She's going to come back with her second question, and there are two more questions in the room, and you guys answered your questions at the. Oh, yeah, raise your hand at the same time.
Okay, I have two. I remember both of them.
Can you remind us of your name and?
My name is Judy Messier.
Judy.
Westside Neighbors Network.
Judy has a question. Two questions.
Actually, there are more comments. One, your
or more comments.
Review of the RFP does not bring up what for me is a very important component of it, is that this is a reimbursement grant as opposed to an upfront grant, which means that you have to spend it for what you want to accomplish and submit for getting reimbursed for that from the levy. For those of us whose budget is $2,000 a year, a reimbursement grant is not possible.
So Judy said that there's something in our review that is important about the grant, and that it's a reimbursement grant and not a upfront grant. And what I will respond to that, Judy, is that this is actually a service dollar a grant. So you, an awardee would be, there are some things that will be equipment. A few pieces can be through the reimbursement process, but mostly how we are doing our grants is service dollars. So you would have an expected monthly service dollar amount with the services that we agree in the contracting process with the awardees makes sense for that entity, and then you would expect those on a monthly basis. So it's not technically a reimbursable, but those dollars are if you are provided an award of a certain amount per year, that's divided monthly, and then those service dollars would be provided monthly.
Do they come at the beginning of the month or at the end of the month? Are you expected to have already spent for those services or whatever, and then get the money after the
We invoice for the prior month. So you're right.
We are expected to be able to cover the cost of that from our own fund sources.
So we are there and eventually that starts to become where that you have those service dollars in your bucket. There are cases where you might be provided upfront funding, for example, to purchase a vehicle. You can say, this is the vehicle, can we have an advancement, describe it, have the invoice available from the dealership. If the awardee is provided that funding to go purchase that, and then you show us the receipt that you purchased.
But if your grant included a staff person, then you would be expected to pay the payroll of that staff person for that month, and then get.
The contracting process will be individualized to the awardee and what makes sense for any particular awardee. So I can't promise that there's one way that we provide these services. What I can say is generally, once a contract gets going and there are capacity, once you have the capacity to continue, you will have those service dollars on a regular basis. Whether there are upfront costs that support that is an individual decision made with a particular awardee.
I'll forego my second one and let somebody else do something, and then I'll come back and do my second.
Okay, so Judy had 2 questions. She's going to hold off on her second question, and we're going to have gentleman whose name I forget, and then Hamdi, he had his hand raised.
My name is Keith.
Keith, sorry.
Okay. I have 2 questions.
Keith might have 2 questions as well.
It has to do with the collaboration with senior hubs discussion about virtual villages. So, one, it's pretty spread out geographically, so we would not necessarily be working with one senior hub. So, is that acceptable? And we may not know exactly which one when we're writing our proposal, because it's going to depend where our clients are.
Okay. So the question is related to a collaboration with senior hubs, and it may not just be with one senior hub, and is that acceptable? And my answer to that is it depends. The program, I can't dictate what an applicant's program model will be. The virtual village concept is that it's a organic group of folks who come together, maybe provide some staffing with funding that they receive through grants like these or fundraising that holds the pieces together. It's a volunteer heavy, membership heavy conglomerate network of people that are coming together to support one another, either through membership or as a volunteer or as a member who volunteers, to engage in community connection and support people to live in their own homes. So if your model, if a model connects that through with varying different entities, and that's a compelling model that makes sense within that rubric, we're not exclusively excluding a particular model or another. What we will be looking at is the spread of VSHSL dollars across the county, and those areas that are receiving senior hub support. If there's a senior hub in that area serving a particular population, the virtual village in that, we want to make sure the dollars are spread around the county to reflect areas, and this, we may have more emphasis on areas that don't have as easy access to senior hubs, whether that's a particular population or a particular geographic area. But it doesn't, we're not limiting senior hubs from applying if knowing that that's what we're looking for. Does that make?
I think so.
Okay.
And I have a question about the budget, about the money.
Okay.
So.
And Keith also has a question about the budget, the money.
Right. So you know, you say it's a 4-year opportunity, but for instance, the first year starts in May. So are you trying to expend an entire year's worth?
So you're asking about questions about expenditure, and we are limited within the VSHSL of spending within the year's allocation, particularly when in the biennia. So the end of the biennia is 2020. So $2020 should be spent in 2020. And so oftentimes startup costs can be higher than other annual costs, or it might, you know, setting up a program costs more than operational costs ongoing. So account for the fact that $2020 are spent from May to December, and additional years are the longer term year.
So does that then mean that 2021 and 2022, they're the same? So
We are limited to spend, right now we're, think about it and on an annual basis. And Hamdi had a question in the room, and then Catherine had remembered her second question.
We have one as well on the phone.
And there's one on the phone, and I believe there's another one behind Catherine.
So I have actually 2 questions. One is, how many agencies are you envisioning will be supporting this funding, given that it's also 4 years, and I don't see that. And another one.
So Hamdi has 2 questions, one of which is how many entities do we anticipate funding? And we're not specifying a number at this point. You can, the first year of funding in 2020, we have $300,000, and then it expands from there. I will take this opportunity to say that one piece in the RFP indicates that if there are several strong applicants and we're not able to fund all applicants in 2020, we may choose to say, hey, we're going to delay this application, this award until the following year. And then that would, the awardee would have to agree to that. But that is an option that we have for this because the funding increases in 2021. And did you have a second question, Hongi?
Yes. My second question is, let's give an example. We serve a lot of diverse African areas.
So I'm going to repeat this so they don't lose what you're saying as you say it. So for the people on the phone, Hamdi is setting an example, showing an example that her entity serves a large number of African immigrants from different parts of diverse parts of Africa.
Mm-hmm. And my question is, I was thinking that the virtual village would be a perfect.
She was thinking the virtual village would be a perfect,
support.
Would be a support for.
Given that we don't have senior centers.
Since there are no senior centers for the particular to the populations.
But then I see that the budget will not help us.
But the budget will not help us
hire somebody from what I see. So it's putting us in a situation where we don't know. So given that you said, emerging virtual villages will be considered probably or not considered regardless.
No, they would be emerging villages or village people coming together to form a village or a village that isn't a village in name yet is an eligible entity. So
the question is now.
So the question is.
There will be a need of real capacity building in that aspect.
So in that type of scenario, there'd be real capacity building.
So how is the county going to be equitable?
How will the county be? We will look at applications and look at the need for a particular entity based on the availability of capacity dollars and make, if an awardee has need for capacity building dollars, we will look at what that need is based against and weighing with other awardees. There are many pieces that go into what the capacity building dollars. Does that?
Yeah.
Okay. And behind Catherine,
Angie. What amount do you have for capacity building dollars in the first year?
I believe it's up to that same amount, the 250,000.
Okay. That's available the first year.
Among it's spread, that is
spread out. That's the whole.
That's the whole kit and caboodle for among all awardees. It's not per award. That is what is available for this strategy. Which.
Not just.
Pardon?
Just the first year.
I can speak to the capacity building dollars that are available right now that I know of. Or 250, yes.
I'd just like to add a comment.
It's adding a comment.
In response to what you were outlining. On our side, within the Mexican American and the Mexican and the Latino community, we represent 34 countries. Mm-hmm. So I hear what you say, that you represent several countries from Africa. We've been representing for over 100 years, 34 countries. So I think what the county is trying to do is equalize the disbursement of funds, even to one country to 50 countries. That's a common. So we represent 34. Just keep that in mind.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. So I hear what you're saying, and we get hurt from time to time when we ask for funding. Mm-hmm. this thing happening. So yeah.
My point was not to on the right or see only the African community. Of course, I know that there are others, but whoever it happens, and I don't have any problem with that. I know you get the funding. That's not an issue. But yeah, it's just that we are called presenting.
So just a comment in the room that folks from different representation groups, cultural groups, oftentimes represent many more countries than that individual, than the individual may be from, or that cultural groups, Latino cultural groups oftentimes are representing many, many countries, as are African cultural groups representing many countries. And the point of this levy is to reach elders, in this particular case, seniors who don't have had traditionally less access to services and supports. In this case, rural elders don't often have access to this kind of cohesive village concept that is available. If you look on the Village to Village website, which is an entity of 100 or more of these growing villages, the diversity is probably not representational of entities and cultures. I can't say that there aren't villages that aren't representative, but it's a model that oftentimes relies on middle class white experience, and we're trying to kind of reflect a different, grow what the village model could be. 2 more questions in the room. Are there any on the phone?
Yes, we do have at least one. I'll read out the one that's been written, and there might be more on the phone.
Take a break from the people in the room and take the phone, Adam's phone, and then we're going to go to Jean Marie and then Catherine.
Okay, so the one that's been written in is from Rihanna. Rihanna says, we are an established village connected to a hub and are considering collaborating with other established villages for a joint request. Would the villages that collaborate with us be able to also request funds as individual villages for separate projects?
So, if my understanding of that question is, could an application have more, can a village apply in more than one application, either as an individual village and also with a collaboration? Is that the question, or is the question, can you collaborate on an application?
I think the question is speaking to if there are multiple villages collaborating into one request, would those villages that are participating in the collaboration also be able to request funds as individual villages for separate projects?
Okay, so the question could be, can an established village participate in more than one application? And there is nothing to keep, we are not excluding particular kinds of application, but we will be looking at where funding is directed, and we'll be making decisions based on spreading funding across the county. So I think that's my answer to that.
So it's not prohibited.
It's not prohibited.
You're not saying it is a guarantee as well.
But there is definitely not a guarantee that all those applicants will be funded, or that an applicant would be funded from more than one application.
And then I'll open it up to the phone. I don't see any other chat requests.
Okay. So we're going to go back to the room, and Jean Marie had a question, and then Catherine had a question, and then Liz has a question, and Judy has a question.
So regarding eligibility.
Regarding eligibility, says Jean Marie.
You have a written 2 sets of eligible village entities who might apply.
2 sets who might apply in the RFP.
And then you use language today that enhanced that a little bit, or enlarged it, at least as I heard it, where if a village was operating within quote unquote easy access to a hub, but was able to complement or expand the services provided by that hub, that village might be eligible for funding. And I want to make sure I understand the complement or expand, and did I hear that correctly?
So that, it was just my way of saying, anybody can apply to this. What we will be looking at are villages, if you are an established village, or whether you're an established village or not, if you are connected to a hub, what is the difference that you're making to this population that hub is not?
That's all I
Does that
need.
make
Just a reiteration, thank you.
Okay. Catherine, and then Liz, and then Judy.
So this has to do with the question around organizational capacity.
The question is related to organizational capacity.
And so we need to show that we understand that this should not be the only source of funding.
We need to show that this is not be the only source of funding.
You're kind of asking us to do an abstract crystal ball projection of where we might find other funding in future years.
And the question is this a crystal ball abstract projection of where we might find funds in future years?
Or do we need to identify specific opportunities?
Thanks, Oleg. Oleg left the room.
Or do we going to need to identify specific funding opportunities?
We do need to identify specific funding opportunities. Need to have the wherewithal to understand that this is a source that needs supplementation, and what is your plan for that supplementing?
And is that supplementation at the end of the funding, or in a, like?
The implementation plan indicates that this is intended to provide partial operational costs of a virtual village.
From the get-go.
Going to be hard.
You can plan your budget and plan your program model based on the understanding that this funding, membership can be an additional funding, other sources can be an additional funding. Know what the request is, and work with your program model to make a request that serves the people you serve, knowing that you should also be looking at sustainability as you move forward.
But you had mentioned, it says that for low-income individuals that couldn't afford membership.
Who may not be able to.
Who may not be able to afford membership. So that model doesn't.
So the village model, one way to be a member is to provide funding, membership funding. There are other ways to sustain a program. There's other ways to participate as members. It's coming to the program with creative ideas and just an understanding that any program model probably is important for you to have diverse sources of funding, as it is for any program that you build. Is this adjacent to that? Because there's two other people that.
I have a follow-up question on Catherine's.
Okay, so Hamdi sounds like she has a follow-up question, and then Liz, you were next, and then Judy.
Okay. So my question is, that what you just asked that we was talking about might not work for that, second plan, like for example, what other sources you have. For an agency like mine, who did not have a resource from the get-go, because this project even itself is new to us. Other than fundraising, I don't know what other sources that I can use that is existing. So could fundraising be something?
Fundraising could be one of the sources that you use as a sustainability model. So the question, sorry I didn't repeat Hamdi's question, was for a startup group, particularly with lesser resources, then this funding really is what's available. Does fundraising count as a concept for sustainability? And that is a source. I'm not going to dictate what the sources are for sustainability. The question really is around how will you sustain yourselves if this, in future years, look at your program model, look at the funding available, put together a program that makes sense for your village and propose it. knowing that sustainability is something you need to think about as well. Liz.
So I was coming to Catherine's question through the budget sheet.
So there's a question about the budget sheet from Liz based on Catherine's question.
Which it indicated that there was money from other sources my question is there a required match?
There is no required match for this.
But there's an anticipation that there will be funding from other sources to support these line items.
And that's not a wherewithal, be withal, every single line item. We're not looking, but thinking about in a good program model, regardless of what program you're building, whether it's a village or not a village, relying on one funding source probably isn't the wisest budget program. So we're just trying to help you think about sustainability and diversity of funding. Judy had a question, and then I didn't catch your name. So Jan.
This is just a comment.
And we have 7 more minutes.
And I will be very quickly.
Thank you, Hamdi.
The profile organization that the levy puts out.
The profile organization that the levy puts out.
It describes a senior village as a service provider organization.
As a service.
And that its raison d'etre is to provide services to particular populations. Interestingly, while that may be a description that fits many villages, it doesn't fit all villages, and it doesn't describe us as a village because we're not a service provider.
And actually, maybe that's my intention is not to have a service provider create a village. This is a group. This can be an organic group of people who come together to build community and connection.
But we don't provide services.
So in your village program model does not support connect
is to build a network of social connection.
Okay, so one model of a village is to build a social network of connection. So there's not the service model component in this particular village where there would be volunteers providing.
Nothing like that. Okay. If members would like some support, they can reach out and say, is there anybody who could support us in this? Or I could do this. But it's not like we come and say, these are the services we could provide, and do you want to join us? That's not our model.
So there's many ways to define the virtual village. Find yourself in the definition and describe the program model that meets what it is you're coming together.
It doesn't feel like the definition that's being provided by the levy RFP doesn't fit who we are as a village. Because we can't say, oh, we're going to provide services to XYZ population, because that's not what we do. So do you
want to bring in XYZ population to your program model to bring engagement?
We reach out one by one to invite people to join us. Come have a meal with us. Let us come show us what your favorite cuisine is, and we'll share ours. And we will build social connection over time.
So building social connection over time, one by one, by reaching out to invite people on an individual basis.
All people, all ages.
All people, all ages.
We don't limit people to a certain age. We have people from 40 and people 90. So it goes across the entire spectrum.
Okay. So this particular funding is available for reaching out to people who are 55 and older, who are of a particular, in particular, the 4 populations we're talking about, to expand the inclusion of folks to those villages. Thank you both. Thank you. And you had a question, Jan.
Total number expected to be served? I mean, I haven't seen any specific.
We are moving away from numbers because we think that a number of people served may not always be the best representation of what a good service is. And so we're not talking about that in this particular, we're not asking for that in this particular. It's like the quality of service, the engagement, the connection, what difference are you making in the community and to an individual population? So does that make sense?
Yeah.
So the question was, we're not talking about numbers served, and answered the way I did that I think you might have heard.
Yep.
Any questions on the phone?
I do have a question.
There is a question.
So, I noticed that, of course, you have a maximum amount that we would be applying for, being funded for, but I was wondering if you had a minimum amount.
The question is, we clearly have a maximum amount. Is there a minimum amount? Right. And there is not a minimum amount you can ask for, but we will look across the awardees and make decisions based on what makes the most sense for a community, for a connection, for the populations we're trying to serve, balanced against the other applications and awards.
Right. I just asked that because there are some organizations that are naturally smaller based on where they're located, or that maybe the types of seniors they're serving. So I just asked that because to kind of, I don't know, just in case an application might look funny if it wasn't asking for a certain amount or not enough, or what might seem like an unusually small amount in the eyes of those reviewing it. So
if the application and program model makes sense to the budget requested, that will be considered in the review process.
Okay, perfect, good.
One last question, Liz, and then it's 2:30.
I want to preface it with a comment.
Prefacing her question with a comment.
In my research about virtual villages, it seems like an anomaly to have government funding for such an entity in the United States.
I don't know. I did not find another government agency saying they're paying for it, but I can't say this is exclusive. So the question was, is this an anomaly having government money funding a village?
And my further question is there any set aside for some kind of gathering or conference or adding to another regional aging conference that would highlight virtual villages as a place where we could all come together and share ideas?
The question is there a set aside for a gathering or a collection of villages coming together? There is not a set aside specifically for that, but if a collaborative of villages were to create an application, that is not a vision that was outlined in this RFP. I think it's an interesting concept, and I don't know if this funding I'm not saying this funding can't support that, but the funding is initially there for starting up and expanding villages to support those populations. In future years, interesting ideas coming together. Interesting idea.
Good, thank you.
Okay, it is now 2:30, and I want to honor people's time. I really appreciate everybody's patience with this technical difficulties at the beginning of this bidders conference. This will be posted along with, I think that every question that was asked prior to has been asked at this piece, but there may be additional ones. We will post these questions and those early next week, and then we will be as responsive and quickly post additional questions as possible. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you very much.